Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. You certainly remember the Online Great Books podcast, don't you? We're back in a bit of a new format, and we might be changing it again fairly soon. We'll see. But that's the great thing about podcasting. It doesn't have to be like 60 Minutes or Good Morning America, where it's just the same thing decade after decade. So Scott and Karl have talked, and I would love it. And this might happen at some point in the future. Maybe the three of us will sit down and talk in a recorded format. Everybody's very busy right now. And what has been decided on is to do the show once a month. We'll do the first Thursday of every month, and it will be a longer show. There's not going to be any cliffhangers. We're not pinned down to, 60 minutes, which is ironically what my target time was for the show for most of the last year. Scott and Karl are in the same room for this one. I hope that continues. That always makes the show better when you're in the same room with the person you're doing the show with. And another new thing is that all the books will be written by communists. We start with The Good Life, written by Scott and Helen Nearing. The Good Life is usually two books bundled together. You'll see this a lot if you go looking for it. The Good Life was written in 1954, and then a follow-up continuing The Good Life in 1979. The subtitle, Helen and Scott Nearing's 60 Years of Self-Sufficient Living. So in the 20th century, because obviously this was a giant craze in the 19th century, Scott and Helen Nearing became the new models of self-sufficient lifestyles and rural homesteading. This pursuit begins during the Great Depression in the 1930s. They flee New York City, which apparently never goes out of style, and they go to the Green Mountains of Vermont, where I went to college. It's beautiful there. And eventually they wound up in Maine. So Scott and Karl will discuss The Good Life today. In fact, I cannot promise that all future shows will be covering books written by communists. I only know that this one is. So there's lots of great books not written by communists. So I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on that one. This is the kind of book I think that makes for the best kind of Online Great Books podcast, where Scott and Karl can have a real exploration just loosely based on the book they read. And that's what they do today, long form. Welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. Thank you for your time and attention. And here we go.
I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Shute.
And I don't remember how we do this.
Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast.
Oh, yeah. Brett should have given us a little intro.
It's been a while. Yeah, we took the summer off to... Why did we take the summer off?
Because I was tired of talking to people.
What's the problem with talking to people?
They don't listen, and then when they do listen, they don't understand. And then when they do understand, they don't act. I feel like I'm shouting it down into a pipe or a well.
All right. Well, there's two things there. Okay. First thing is, there are people out there that listen. This is what I've found. Somebody out there gets it. On the other hand, you're talking to me, so just other people are listening. It doesn't matter. You're just talking to me. So if maybe I'm the problem, that I'm not hearing
the microphone's the problem. Because if it's just me and you, I got other shit to say.
We are actually, we are sitting at my house in my fortress of solitude, so that the audio levels might not be well.
Yeah, it'll be all right.
It'll be fine.
So that's another thing. You said there are two things.
No, the first thing was that somebody hears you. The second thing was that, well, you're talking to me. And then I started to worry that you're saying that you're talking and nobody's listening. And like, I was listening.
Well, I know you're listening. But another thing is, and it's current year, and there is a chilling effect on speech.
That's for sure.
And I don't like the tippy-toeing and, not being able to speak freely.
Right.
It's really tiring to do a show and really not be able to say everything that I feel like needs to be said. But it can't, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, it's like you were talking about crawling into chicken broiler shelters, not broilers. That's kind of what you have to do to maintain a platform these days, is you have to shrink your discourse, squeeze it in that little door, and not hit the sides.
The Overton door.
Yeah. And it is, those of you out there who consume content, it's kind of exhausting. You know, you want to speak freely, and you can't.
No, you can't.
We did a show a long time ago about Strauss and esoteric writing. You know, Plato does not ever tell you what he thinks. I get very frustrated when it's one of my tests for if somebody's just like a third-rate scholar. If he says, Plato says,
right,
immediately you're a loser. You don't know what the hell Plato said. He, on purpose, put it in layers, onion layers, so that you wouldn't know what he said.
That killed his teacher.
Exactly.
He knew.
So if he's going to say what he wants to say, he has to say it in allegory and mystery and riddle, and meet him out behind the Chevron in Fresno, and he might whisper to you the truth. But
yeah, but I'm not Plato. I'm not Socrates. You know, I don't have the skills to do that. And so if I have a point in front of me that I want to make, and I have a toolbox and I have to throw half of the tools out, I often can't make my point. And I end up, well, either limping in and not doing a good job, or just bypassing that, not even making the point at all. And that's really tiresome.
Right.
It's physically tiring to me. I get done with the show and I'm just, ugh, the Asimov show, ugh.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I was thinking maybe we just ought to read true books.
True books. Well,
like
those are a problem too.
Yeah.
So there's that. That's one reason why it was good to take off the summer. But I've also been really, really, really busy. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Really busy. And that's kind of slowing down, but here we are. We're 2 days from the solstice, and not the solstice, the equinox. It's 100 degrees. My truck said it was 100 degrees coming over here.
Yeah.
I've been working out in it all day. I'm just worn out. And it's been like that all summer. It's been good.
Oh, it's good, but it's busy. I was telling my wife earlier today, I think I'm not a homesteader. I think I have a country estate currently.
Right.
And she thought I was mad or something. And I wasn't mad. I've got a garden, and I've worked pretty hard on that, but I don't have any animals. My fence isn't up yet. You know, this is a country estate.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. You can't be a homesteader unless you're a workaholic. You're dumb. And I'm kind of both. Fence is nearly done.
Yeah.
On the south acreage. North one's not.
Well, I don't have as many acres. This fence shouldn't be too hard to get up. This year has just been prep work. Okay, so we're reading a book. We're reading a book by a couple of communists called The Good Life by Helen and Scott Nearing, 60 Years of Self-Sufficient Living.
And they really are communists. Like, you're not just like throwing that around like Nazi or commie. Like, they state it.
Right.
They're real live 1930s New England commies.
Yeah. But it's still a good book. I thought it was a really good book. I thought to me, they're kind of like atheist Mennonites.
Yep.
That go off into Vermont, into the back country in Vermont, and buy some land and start living on it to try to be self-sufficient, they say they got 80% of their calories from their garden. I'm not so sure. I'd like to measure that with a bomb calorimeter. But even so, that's pretty good, but you're not going to get 100%.
Did you do any homework on these people?
No, I just read the book. I didn't look at anything else.
Scott and Helen Nearing, Neering. It's called The Good Life. This book has become a classic among the sort of back to the land movement people of the 20th century. Mother Earth News. Helen wrote for Mother Earth News, I believe, quite a bit. He was a lot older than her, maybe 20 years older than her, something like that. And they set out from New York City to Vermont and live, try to be self-sufficient. I have my reasons. Theirs are basically communist reasons. Mm-hmm. They want to leave the capitalist society behind. They have these ideas about work where they talk about your bread work and your economic work, which are interesting. We'll talk about that more. So they're trying to live out a 1930s communist ideal, which is interesting. But Scott Nearing had a bit of a trust fund, and he had funding from an outside source. Not that he had a sponsor, but he had a trust fund. The guy had cash, and he was able to go do this. I'm not saying he's a hypocrite or anything, but if you look at this and you say, oh, I want to be self-sufficient, I want to have this acreage, I want to do these things, it costs money. And even though they weren't paying a lot of money for their land, they weren't paying a lot of money for the cement mixer they used for 20 years that they talk about, he had a nest egg that he could depend on. I'm the same way. I sold a business. I've got cash. I can go buy land. I can do what I need to do. I can write a check for fencing supplies if it's $8,000, and if you don't have that stuff, it's really tough. So I'm not pooping on him, but if you want to live the communist ideal and you want to live simply, it costs a lot of money to do that. That's why nobody does it. Poor people would grow oats and eat porridge if it was cheaper than the stuff at Dollar General or at McDonald's, and it's not.
I'm not so sure about that. I think, as an old friend of mine once said, poor people are poor because they're poor people.
Well, there's something to that. There's something to that.
Yeah, and so, okay, so you could plant oats in your backyard, and
you have to have a backyard.
Well, okay, so you can here. Let's presume you got a little bit. Take this land, you can plant it, and you can hoe it, and you can make sure that it's tended, and 3 or 4 months from now, you can get some oats that you can make porridge from, and you'll have food for the winter. A lot of people will look at that work, and they're going to be like your broiler chickens, and they're going to sit down and die rather than work in a field.
That's true. Not willing to do the work, low time preference. I mean, I got to sweat right now and dig a hole and whatever, and then it's for food in March. They won't do it. They won't do it. But the Nearings do. They got tired of town, and not because it was town, not like me. I don't think it's like they were tired of town like I am. They were tired of town because it runs on capitalism. And they determined that rural Vermont would be a place where they could escape from that and live out an ideal. And ultimately, I think they wanted to build not a commune, but a community. They wanted to organize a community around these ideals and leave that capitalist life behind. What does that mean, capitalist life? Well, if you live in New York City, you have to buy everything. You're probably going to have rent. You may have a mortgage. You're probably going to have rent. You have to work to pay the rent. You have to work to pay the electricity bill. You have to work to pay for the groceries. You have to work to buy, everything. And you can't, if you live in Manhattan, you can't do any work that directly provides you the end.
No.
You can't grow a tomato. There's nowhere to do that. You can't cut firewood to heat the house. If you want to have shelter, food, clothing, and heat, you can't do any work to get directly to those ends if you live in a big city. And Marx said that the work was alienated from its end. You go work at a factory so that what? So you can have food, so you can have shelter, all these things. He would rather you work directly to obtain those things. I agree, by the way. And they went to Vermont to do that. They did a pretty good job.
Well, and they were able to do it, and maybe not everybody can do it. I was just thinking as you were talking that there's a common complaint amongst the other wing, and they'll say, well, if you look at the tax dollars, New York City and Los Angeles provide a whole lot more tax dollars than, say, Kansas.
Right.
This is true. But
that's not what Kansas is for.
This is true, but you can't eat dollars. And the urban areas produce nothing of what they eat. And so you measure wealth by the Nearings, what do they call it? Dollar slavery. I was reading Herb Cohen's book on persuasion, and he talks about when you're going to buy something, what you've got, you're selling dollars. And so that's your negotiating. You have dollars, they have the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're selling to them. And I thought that's a good thought. But what New York City, what Wall Street is producing is dollars and dollar derivatives and no food.
Right.
So to measure them on the wealth scale, I would take the food because you can't eat dollars. I want to read a little of their, this is page 3.
I lost my book.
Yeah, Scott lost his book. So he's doing it from his phonographic memory. When we moved to Vermont, we left a society gripped by depression and unemployment, falling a prey to fascism, this is the 1930s, and on the verge of another worldwide military free-for-all, and entered a pre-industrial rural community. The society from which we moved had rejected in practice and in principle our pacifism, our vegetarianism, and our collectivism. So thorough was this rejection that, holding such views, we could not teach in the schools, write in the press, or speak over the radio, and thus denied our part in public education. Under these circumstances, where could outcasts from a dying social order live frugally and decently, and at the same time have sufficient leisure and energy to assist in the speedy liquidation of the disintegrating society and help replace it with a more workable social system? So they're accelerationists?
And wrong about almost everything. Communism was on the ascendancy. FDR was the president. Now, they're right about the pacifism. They're right about the vegetarianism, but they're not right about anything else he says there. Poor little Scott Nearing.
Are you saying his side won?
Yes. Yeah. But on the other hand, it sounds like I wrote that.
Yeah. One of their goals is to assist in building up a psychological and political resistance to the plutocratic military oligarchy. Well, I don't know about building up a resistance movement to it, but
he was right about that being a problem, and that was ascendant and still is.
Yeah. Assuming that this book is honestly written and earnestly meant, which what they say, it seems like it. The tone of it seems like it.
I believe them.
That they decided that they didn't want to have anything to do with 1930s America, and so they tried not to. They actually tried not to. They went out into the woods and lived in a stone house that they built themselves, and where that's challenging is if you, dear listener, if you have convictions, if you're part of OGB or you're just one of our listeners and you start thinking and you develop convictions, well, what do you do about them?
Well, depends on what the convictions are.
So, for example, one will complain about, the pervasive and degenerate influence of social media. Okay. Are you still on it? Are your kids on it? What have you done to get away from it? Maybe not. Maybe you haven't done anything. Maybe your conviction is that a society without religious belief is going to fall apart. Okay. What are you doing about it? Or the food supply is bad. The food supply is poisonous. What are you doing about it? So that they go off into the woods and do it is challenging. Of course, they didn't have any children. Being communist Mennonites, there are options available to them that aren't necessarily so easy for everybody else. But taking some kind of action based on one's convictions, that's a good thing. That pricks my conscience.
Yeah, convictions are nothing without action. And they acted. They're vegetarians.
I know.
And they're vegetarians because they're communists, and they see eating animals as exploitative.
Yeah, your cat is a slave. I think they've got that backwards.
Right, that part. I think they're right about that. I mean, I exploited the shit out of a bunch of chickens this weekend right into the freezer. But I think that's the perfect natural order. I don't have a problem with that. And I think that they didn't write a lot about that conviction and how they got there or whatever in the book. And I don't think I have to hear all of their arguments to understand where they're coming from there, knowing about, the 1930s and through the 50s communists in North America. But that is just absolutely fucking stupid. It is. I think it's just absolutely wrong-headed and stupid. It's just to not understand anything about hierarchy. But, communism denies hierarchy, period. Yeah. It's about flattening everything. And, maybe in terms of the human, okay, that guy's not better than me. Bill Gates has no say over me just because of his whatever. Okay. Humans are categorically different than animals. The rules that apply to humans, in my opinion, do not apply to the animals. And it's a category error. The Nearings are making a category error, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, we are incommensurable. There's no amount of goodwill and careful discussion between them and me that would ever clear that up, probably. Somebody's going to have to get hit by a lightning bolt and have their metaphysics changed. And I can't do that. But that's a big problem. And they move out into the woods of Vermont. And I like their work schedule. I think they have, what do they call it? They work for 4 hours a day. And I think half of it is what they call their bread work, which is where you work for your bread. That's biblical for them. They mention about how man must work for his bread. And then they have what they call their economic work, which is the work they need to do so they can pay their property tax, so they can buy gasoline for their pickup truck, which they love, and so on. And I really like that. But I am not going to eat gruel like a fucking peasant. What an immiserating, disgusting life they live, eating like boiled grains and squashes and so exclusively. No eggs, no broth for their porridge. I mean, boiled barley and squashes and greens. No.
Earlier you talked about communism as the peasants wouldn't live like the peasants wouldn't live like that. Communism as being the flattening out of hierarchy. I think that's right. I think we'll go further and say, and I'm getting this from other people, that it's communism, as I see it, is driven by resentment. It's not a positive system at all. We hate hierarchy. We hate that some people are better than others, and we're going to smash it all. Mm-hmm. And communism is just the theory to cloak the destructive smashing.
100%.
And you said that you thought the rules of nature don't apply to humans. I think they do.
Well, the rules for animals don't apply to humans. I think we're part of the natural order. But, animals eat animals, and I think we can too. But in terms of exploitation, in terms of hierarchy, in terms of economic fairness, those sorts of rules, I don't think they do apply to chickens.
No, but the natural hierarchy applies very much to humans, I think. I think we make a big mistake when we... all the equality rhetoric. If humans are equal, it's volitional equality. It's not natural equality. You're going to treat them as if they are equal, or perhaps the supreme being may treat them as if they are equal from his point of view, but they're not.
It's equivocal equality, not univocal equality.
Maybe it's anagogical? What is the other one?
Analogical.
Analogical, yeah. Yeah, it's just, there's...
It is analogical equality.
Yeah. Maybe we should read more Aquinas.
Oh. That's another great thing about not doing this damn show for the last months is I could spend more time on that. I'm in my home book group is reading Summa Contra Gentiles. We're taking 24 months to work our way all the way through the thing. So we're doing, 124 of the month. And I didn't have to speed through that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
and it's so meaty and so good. I don't want to read anything else hardly. I like read books about like grafting pecan trees and then Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It sounds good.
It is.
It sounds good.
Yeah, it is. What about their food? Like, well, okay, wait a minute. No, not their food. What about their attitudes towards entertainments or pleasure or whatever? Right. Like, what do the Nearings do for a good time?
On Sundays, they have music. She gets out her recorder, and they have music.
Do you think it's because they're having a hootenanny and a good time, or are they community organizing?
Yeah, I think they probably have a low pleasure threshold. I don't.
So these are the New England Puritans that Moldbug says that the woke movement is descended from. I mean, these Scott and Helen Nearing, now they would argue with me, but they don't know. They are basically joyless people. They eat oatmeal all day, every day, and stack rocks and live in reaction to all that is. And they like to write a little bit, and they say that they work 4 hours a day and then they spend the rest of the time on, these other diversions. But this is not a joyful life that they live they picked the words, they wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, what's happening to us now, the prevailing, political powers are not joyful.
You say they're joyless. I think that I can see what you're saying. On the other hand, I look at the ways that we divert ourselves today and think that if that's joy, that's not very joyful. Oh gosh, I was reading a writer, an internet writer named Zero H.P. Lovecraft. He's got this book called The Gig Economy. I haven't read the whole thing, but he has this notion in the beginning. It's kind of a horror story, I think.
It's not the jig economy?
It's the gig economy. It is a hard G on both ends. And he's got what does he call it? The Minotaur. And the Minotaur in the story is an AI routine that leaks out of Facebook that is designed to maximize your engagement. Then what it does is it will replace all of your inputs on all of your devices and screens and everything with what it wants to show you. And it's driven by likes. You keep clicking it to get the dopamine rush, and eventually it kills you. It starves you and kills you, and it does this by design, and then it moves on to the next target. It's kind of a Lovecraftian monster for the digital age.
It's what they're doing. What are his sources? Because it's not fiction.
I don't know. He's an anon.
Yeah.
Don't know who he is in real life. That's terrifying. But if you look at the way people live their lives, you just kind of think, well, what are they doing for fun? I remember you were talking about some neighbor of yours that they don't have much house, but they've got a hot tub and they sure do a lot of living, you said.
Yeah.
And I thought that was nice. And, if you're out there with your family and having a good time, that's great. But, what are people doing with their time? What are they doing? Are they reading great literature? No, my God. I read a little bit. I read fun stuff when I go to bed. And I can't find anything. I can't find anything that's even good enough to be fun. I mean...
Yeah, we need to talk about the novel, by the way, like the state of the novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's done. That isn't to say that people can't write novels that are enjoyable or whatever, but as an art form, I think it's pretty complete.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about art forms being complete. I think that's probably true, for example, about the symphony.
Yeah.
I signed up for another classical music streaming service. Apple killed Primephonic, and I tried to live without it. Well, anyway, you're not going to do better than Beethoven on the symphony. There are other iterations of it. Brahms is really good. Mahler's really good, except almost too weird. Shostakovich is on the border of too weird, but still very good. What else are you going to do in the symphonic form for a symphony?
Yeah,
you're going to bang pots and pans and scream?
You end up going full Britain. What are you going to do?
It just
you go cage on it.
Yeah, you just have silence. So that if you don't know, dear listener, John Cage, is it John?
I think it's John.
He has a famous work. It's called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And it's either degenerate or trolling. And you go and you sit and you listen to a performance of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And what it is the orchestra sits there silent for 4 minutes and 33 seconds.
Well, they're getting union scale.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good for them. And this is modern art. This is the culmination of modern art, which is nothingness.
Yeah, we need some new art.
So it doesn't mean you could write. I mean, Haydn wrote like 87 symphonies. You can write symphonies. They'll be pleasant. They're going to be variations on the same thing.
If you try to innovate it, you will have to be gross.
Yeah.
You can do good. You can write good novels. You know, Monster Hunter novels are a delight.
If Jane Austen had lived to be 90, she could have written many more novels just as good as Pride and Prejudice. I don't even want to think what she could have done to Darcy in a modern... I watched, and I talked about this before, way back at like 10 years ago. I watched a sort of a YouTube presentation of Pride and Prejudice. And what was it called? The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. It was like
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, and it was, I thought it was kind of fun and, you know, adapting a new medium. And they get to the end, and because it's modern and we can't have nice things, she and Darcy don't get married. They go in a relationship.
Right. Great.
There's nothing at stake. You know, the whole point is marriage is a big deal for these people. And so they completely broke it. And a novel has to be a story. There has to be development. There has to be an event. And if you live in a world where you don't have events and stories, you can't do it.
So the Nearings are joyless.
Yeah, but my point is that many of the things for which we find joy could be carved away because it's not really joy. You know, there's a lot of things that you could just not do.
Yes. I think if I was talking to the Nearings, who I'm fond of, by the way, I'm gonna shit on them here for 2 hours, but I think they would tell me they were joyful. But colors are brighter for me and food tastes better for me than it does for them. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. There are other people who I read who are part of the Back to the Land movement whose enthusiasm and joy comes through the page. Mm-hmm. Joel Salatin is ecstatic about the way his world is and his role in it. And there's a lunatic I read named Connor Crickmore who owns Neversink Farm in upstate New York. He's a market gardener, and he's a lunatic. He's a workaholic, and he delights in it. If the straighter his row is, the better his life is. Like he loves it, and it comes through. When Scott and Helen wrote this book, maybe that wasn't their goal, but it typically bubbles through. You know, they don't talk about the view. You know,
That's
they
true.
Talk about how lovely the garden is, or it's not an aesthetic experience for them.
This is not Walden.
No, you know why? It's because they're communists. They don't pursue; they react. Their life is not a pursuit of the good, the beautiful, and the true. It's a reaction to that which they don't want. I think.
I want to go through their list on page 6.
Oh yeah, let me go there in my memory.
You think he's joking?
No, I don't know it.
After 20 years of experience, some of it satisfactory and some of it quite the reverse, we were able to report that a piece of eroded, depleted mountain land was restored to fertility. 2, a farm economy was conducted successfully without the use of animals or animal products or chemicalized fertilizers. Well, we talked about the animals. They're right about a lot of things in agriculture. I'm coming to see. The more I read about this stuff, the more worried I get. You know, how many more harvests can we extract out of the dead soil of North America? But 3, I underlined in 3. I probably won't do all of these. A subsistence homestead was established, paying its own way and yielding a modest but adequate surplus. Okay, so if they had done it joyfully, or more joyfully, I think you might like it better. But they say, in short, We had an economic unit which depression could affect but little and which could survive the gradual dissolution of United States economy.
Okay, I like that.
I like that as a target. I like that you could be more impervious. It's not that you're going to be self-sufficient. That is almost impossible. I remember hearing about a guy that went off and lived, I think in Vermont, and lived in the forest in Vermont for 20 years. He just walked out of high school, but he ended up robbing from the...
Yeah, he was stealing food and clothes.
Yeah, it's real hard to live on your own and be self-sufficient. But you could be more self-sufficient. And think of it as a continuum. The more self-sufficient you get, the less the things out there affect you.
Todd Dwyer, who I do the other show with, Growing Resilience podcast.
I'm 3 episodes behind. I'm sorry.
Well,
I was catching up today.
I don't know how good it is right now, but
it's pretty good.
Thank you. He doesn't focus on the self-sufficiency thing. It's resilience. Will this make you more resilient? Will this make your food supply more resilient? Your economics more resilient? Resilience. Hardiness. Taleb would say, does this increase or decrease your fragility?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's right. I did a podcast with Matt Reynolds on barbell logic, and he was looking at what I'm doing at our place as a exercise and self-reliance. And maybe it's not. I mean, we're just it's a semantic game, but you just can't be reliant. Self-reliant like that. I try and I try and I try, and I still end up going to town.
Mm-hmm.
We're connected to town by wires and pipes, and okay, I'm watching piece by piece, slowly, the BBC series. I think it's called Secrets of the Castle. Remember Tudor Monastery Farm? It's the same crew.
Ruth,
who I love. Got a crush on her.
She's not overly attractive until she starts talking.
Oh,
and then she's super charming.
She would be a passionate and enthusiastic friend.
I understand.
I can't remember the name of the castle. So a group of people are building a castle by traditional, historically accurate means in France, and it's like a 1250 era castle, and this group of people go and hang out for a year and follow this. They're nothing like self-reliant in 1250.
Yeah.
Nothing like self-reliant. I watched the episode, it's episode 2, and they build a crossbow. It's about the defense of the castle.
Is it the crossbow or the trebuchet?
Well, the trebuchet is, this was the crossbow that I'm thinking of. And there's a guy that makes the metal stirrup on the front of the crossbow that you step in when you charge it or cock the crossbow, whatever you call it. And he's a blacksmith, and he's skillful, and it's great. And he says, it's the Milton Friedman thing. He's like, nobody knew how to make a crossbow. He said, we have all of these surnames that still exist in England because nobody knew how to make a crossbow. Stringer, Fletcher, Smith, all of these people, their whole life was dedicated to fletching crossbow bolts or making string for longbows, for English longbows or crossbows. There was nothing like self-reliance in 1200.
No, well, mythologically, there wasn't even self-reliance in the garden.
Right.
So maybe self-reliance isn't the right goal.
To be fair to the Nearings, they're not trying to be self-reliant. They are trying to minimize exploitative economic transaction. They don't want to exploit anybody else or even an animal. They won't even milk a cow, for crying out loud. That is so intellectually lazy.
At least they did it and tried to grow most of their own food. The vegetarianism, which is you're going to turn up your nose at eating meat, but then you're going to eat corn and soy from a factory farm.
Yeah.
You're not helping. You think you're helping and makes you feel better, but you're not helping. You're actually killing the land.
So the Nearings, I don't know how many acres they had. 20, 80?
I don't know. They kept buying more. An acre of land in Vermont was cheaper than an axe.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the things they say. So they bought a piece of land. It was a depleted old farmstead. The houses were falling down. The barns and the outbuildings were in poor repair. And one of the things they say over and over in this book is don't remodel a wooden structure. They're just not worth it. Economically, it doesn't make sense. And whatever you do to improve that structure will eventually, go to naught. And they advocate building stone buildings. And they did that by hand.
Took them 10 years to build the house.
Yeah, it took them 10. Yeah. And I think they built 14 structures in 20 years or something like that. And every time, Salatin says never go anywhere empty-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime they did anything, they were picking up rocks and piling rocks.
Which you could do in Vermont.
And they end up building these stone buildings and gardening, diligent composters. And so they provided for their food and shelter in that way. They also cut firewood. They're in Vermont. Lots of timber.
Mm-hmm.
Deadfalls are plentiful, and they heated their homes with wood. Their homes are well thought out, and while they're not insulated, huge thermal mass, you get that thing warm. It's like a Russian mass heater, their whole damn house. I like reading about that. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Not practical here. We don't have the stone in Oklahoma to do what they did, but they have an economic problem. So that's their bread labor, right? If you cut firewood, that's bread labor. If you garden, that's bread labor. These are the things that meet your immediate needs. But you have to do economic labor because you have taxes to pay for and things that you can't do for yourself. And their economic labor was almost entirely maple syrup harvest there in Vermont. And boy, what a fortunate thing that is.
Yeah.
That they had that. It's in demand. People love maple syrup. Can you imagine having maple syrup that nobody wanted? No. It has a beginning and an end. You're real busy when the sap is running, and then you're not. It's perfect.
There's a little bit blackpilling for me. Because my kids like maple syrup. At least I thought it was maple syrup. And then I looked at the ingredients on the maple syrup. There is no maple in maple syrup. It's all corn, 100% corn. Actual maple syrup, you have to look up on the top shelf. It's like top shelf liquor. Mm-hmm. And you buy this little jar for $8.
It's for us people that are over 6 feet.
Well, it's good. It's good for them that their local cash crop was not morally problematic for them.
Yeah.
If you were living out here and trying to find a cash crop, what would it be? I was researching. I was going to dip my toes into some actual picking my own stock investment. I haven't done it yet. So what I was looking, you can crap on my plan, but I was going to look for high dividend per stock cost. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's like if I found 8% or something, I was going to look into that company. Mm-hmm. Historical. You can't predict dividend yields in the future, but historically, they paid 8% of their stock price. That's better than inflation. Well, it's better than the official inflation or thereabouts. It's better than a bank. I was going to try it. And one of the best companies that I found, it's this real estate holding company. And I looked into what they do, and they are facilitating marijuana farms.
Right. Yeah, most of the equities that are going to pay you those kind of dividends are going to be real estate investment trusts or royalty trust, oil and gas royalty trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking, do I want to do this? Not sure. Maple syrup is not morally evil.
Right.
Marijuana might be.
You're going to be a soporifics grower.
Yeah.
Well, carbohydrates, you see, Yeah, they're fortunate to have that, and I'm no sour grapes or resentment there. That's they could have gone anywhere in the country, and they did their homework, and they chose Vermont, and that's one of the reasons why they did. So they were able to work their tails off when the sap started running. I don't know when that is, February, March in Vermont. They ended up building a sugaring house, so they would gather all that sap and boil it down and make syrup. They would also, I think they would ended up processing syrup for other people on shares. And it had a nice little business out of that. And they were able to pay their property taxes, buy a truck if they needed to. They wore out a couple of trucks hauling all these rocks and gravel, all this rock and gravel around, buy fuel, and have a life. People were attracted to what they did, and they had a steady flow of guests there at the farm to see what they were doing, to learn from what they were doing, and probably a lot of them were just straight up voyeurs. But a lot of people from all over the world really that were trying to figure out how to be good commies from the Nearings.
Well, okay. On the other hand, they're not good. They're not good commies.
Because they weren't dead?
No.
The only commies.
Well, yes. Well, they are now, so maybe they are. But no, we went through, when I was young, we went through East Germany in about 1992.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster. And so, the historically industrious German people, you cross the border to where the form of government was officially communist, and everything was terrible.
Well, they didn't do it right.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that the Nearings are terrible communists because they work really hard.
Right.
Yeah. For most of us, if we have no incentive, and they do have incentive, the harder they work, the harder they work in their bread work, the more they can do their leisure.
The harder they work in their bread work, the yummier their porridge is.
Well, they did have maple syrup. Did they not eat the maple syrup?
They ate maple syrup, but
porridge with maple syrup is tolerable. Although, wait, isn't porridge? It wouldn't even be porridge. Isn't porridge like the bacon fat mixed with the
pottage? Ruth Goodman in the Tudor Monastery Farm, The Secrets of the Castle. These medieval people were eating a lot of pottage, stews in a clay pot, basically. But they would have grains, pieces of pork, pieces of chicken, fat, whatever they could get, and put it in a pot and put it on a fire and just cook it till it submitted and it was digestible. But I can imagine that's flavorful. There's something there. There's protein in it, for crying out loud. Fucking beans and grain.
Beans and rice make complete protein, just not very much of it. So they have this, I'm still on page 33. All of our operations will be kept on a cash and carry basis. No bank loans, no slavery to interest or mortgages, notes, and IOUs. And then one more line. Under any economy, people who rent out money live on Easy Street. I thought you probably would have liked that. They have the money. They're rich communists. They have the money to go buy the land.
All the best communists are.
Yeah. But, they're not wrong. People who rent out money live on Easy Street. That renting out money is a weird thing. Renting out a means of exchange and getting paid a means of exchange for renting it out seems metaphysically wrong.
Well, because it is. Are you baiting me right now?
I would never do that.
Well, it is. People talk about lending, but it's not lending. It's not lending.
No, I have your shovel, by the way. I keep forgetting to bring it back.
I lent Karl my shovel. He dug a hole. He returns the shovel to me. I still have the shovel, and now he has a hole.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's richer. If I lend you the money to buy a shovel, you take the money, you spend it, it's depleted, it's gone, and now you have a shovel. but I don't have the money. So now you have to dig holes with your shovel to get more money to return it to me. You don't return the same money. Thomas tells us...
And I have to return that plus interest.
That plus interest. And Thomas tells us that money is like wine. If I loan wine to you and you drink it, you don't give me that wine back. You have to obtain new wine. Under a circumstance where you didn't have wine in the first place.
Maybe we ought to see if we can dig up Thomas on usury and money.
Yeah.
See if there's a good chunk that we could read.
No, there is. It's in the second part, I think.
Of which Summa?
The big one.
The big one.
Yeah.
The not as good one.
I don't know about that.
Uh,
Money, while it is fungible, it is actually a medium of exchange. And when you borrow money, you don't return that money to the lender. It's used up. It's gone. When you borrow the money, it's used up and it's gone. It's not, and you don't even rent it, actually. If you rent a house to somebody, the house is still there. It's a metaphysical abomination. It really is. Yeah, I did 2 hours on this a couple of months ago with my kids about the problems with borrowing money. And the problems with borrowing money arise from the fact that it is metaphysically an abomination. It's not a problem, because I have to pay interest. You have to pay interest because it's fucking wrong. There's a reason why almost every single culture that has ever existed would not tolerate it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the most consistent prohibitions in the Bible is against usury.
It's one of the most consistent prohibitions across every single culture that has ever been. There's almost no society that has ever walked the face of the earth until 1940, 1917, that would tolerate it at all.
Yeah.
And it's
but it's progress, right. Scott. How are we going to... You can't go back.
Right.
You just can't.
So the Nearings are right about this.
Yeah, they're right about a few things. I got angry on page 45. Oh, no, 43. That took a while. I like their way of setting up jobs. If I were as organized as this, it would be a good thing. They have a card index of activities. They write down jobs to be done, and they put them in clear weather jobs, rainy day jobs. They have for the different kind of weather, this is the job you do, and you go grab a card and do it. I like that idea. The thing that made me mad was, ordinarily, capital goods should last a lifetime. Our cement mixer, for instance, bought new in 1933 for $20, was still doing good work when we passed it on to Herbert Leader 20 years later. Capital goods should last a lifetime. I haven't had a refrigerator last longer than 6 years.
Yeah. We're building a house right now, and the wife went to go pick out appliances. And I said, buy the cheapest fucking everything that you can get. And then we'll buy the extended warranty. Because none of it's any good. You go buy the Viking whatever. Mm-hmm. It's still a piece of garbage. It's made by the same people who make I don't know who. There are a couple of manufacturers, right? And they assemble parts from Mexico and China somewhere in the United States. And they're all basically the same when you pull the veneer off of them. And none of them last. I'm like, we need to buy the cheapest thing we can get, because none of them will be here in 2040. Now, I didn't win that. I did mostly. We bought a Blue Star gas cook range that I think is going to be a very good piece of equipment. It ought to last. But no standing flame pilot lights anymore. They have to be that piezoelectric garbage because the government won't let you have a standing flame. So if you have a standing flame pilot light, no moving parts, no electronics, no nothing. They decided that was not good enough for me. So,
yeah,
we'll probably have some problems with that. But no, it's wonderful. Pete with Just a Few Acres Farm, on YouTube that I like to watch. He just backed his 1951 International Harvester Super C tractor in the shop and just completely tore it down and is rebuilding it. Summer's over. It's a rainy day project time. And I don't know how old he is. He's maybe 54, something like that. He's like, I'm going to rebuild this. I'm going to go all the way through it. And I should never have to do anything but change spark plugs and oil in it until I'm dead. It's already 70 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to get a truck. I want an old truck.
Yeah.
With no computers in it, nothing. Yeah, I found out you can't get a small truck anymore.
Nope. They're illegal.
Oh my gosh, I don't need an enormous one. I just need a place to throw things in the back and haul stuff.
Somebody's saying, what do you mean they're illegal? If the gross vehicle weight is under X, they have to meet certain fuel consumption requirements. And if you have a 1992 Toyota Tacoma, will not allow Toyota Motor Company to meet all their CAFE requirements across their whole fleet, so that you can't buy a small Toyota Tacoma anymore.
Right.
They're enormous. My truck, my Ford F-250, is bigger than the 1969 Dodge D300 we used to have.
Yeah.
1-ton truck.
Yeah, people can. Why are all these? They'll say, why are these rednecks driving these enormous trucks? Because they have to. It's the only trucks they can get. I got mechanics that I think would do a good job with it. And, I went over there the other day to the mechanics that I like here, and just an oil change. And they're showing me they found a 65 Buick Skylark in a barn that they're fixing up. Mm-hmm. It has nothing in it right now. The motor's out. And that looks like rewarding work. I wish I knew how to do that stuff.
Somebody that knows how to do these things and cares should start a business where you buy pre-70 model vehicles. Don't restore them for show or whatever, but make them right.
Mm-hmm.
Rebuild what needs to be rebuilt. Put disc brakes on them. They need to be 4-wheel drive trucks. You put a toolbox in the back of the thing, and it has an extra distributor cap, spark plug wires, has belts and hoses, and you just make super reliable sleeper Armageddon Mad Max vehicles.
Yeah,
and you go like I said, go through them and make them reliable. Disc brakes, holy smoke, man! Disc brakes are really really good, but you could make a killing with that.
Yeah, the stuff should last. Nothing lasts. It's really, really frustrating. Complaining about note taking. I like gadgets for note taking. I have one of the fancy ones here. I like to handwrite, and I want the thing to figure out what I wrote and change it to text. And so a while back, I got a top of the line one, and it's just randomly breaking now. It's 5 years old. The battery's fine. Everything's fine. It just randomly stops. It's unreliable. Capital goods should last a lifetime. That should be like on the door to the inferno, like abandon hope, all ye that enter here. Capital goods should last for a lifetime.
Work makes you free.
Right.
Is that a reasonable expectation, though?
Well, it should last a long time. It would if you were not so alienated from the products of your labor. My mom had a refrigerator for 45 years. Nothing's changed. I mean, the refrigerant's changed, but why does it have to be that everything breaks? Well, it's good for somebody that everything breaks, because what it does is it increases the velocity of the dollar rental. Mm-hmm. That's what it's good for.
Well, and people are too alienated. We're building this house. Well, you and your family came in and looked at the house, and your oldest daughter, she says, "Oh, it's so neat you're building your dream house." And I was like offended by that, because it's not an aspirational thing that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it the way I think it ought to be done. Right? There's nothing. Is that a dream? I don't know. I know what she meant. She's being very sweet, but mm-hmm. I'm just doing it the way I think it should be done. And Katie, our friend Katie and Aaron, they came and looked at the house, and they may want to do this at some point. So they said, tell us everything that you are doing here with this that's unusual, or give us the tour. Well, one of the things is it's all been framed out of Douglas fir. That used to be fairly common, and now it might be white pine, it might be spruce, whatever. The Douglas fir holds a nail better, by far. By far, it's just better lumber. It costs extra money. I have sealed that house up. It's on a crawl space. There's just all kinds of stuff that I've done there. That once the sheetrock is up and it's painted, nobody will know, and it's going to make that house way more expensive than it would be if we just did it the way everybody else does it. And I think it was Katie said, well, you could probably do this and have a market niche. I'm like, no, you couldn't. Nobody will pay for it. Nobody will pay for it. We're putting a standing seam metal roof on the house. There will be 0 penetrations in the roof. Not one. There will not be a single hole in that metal roof. The only way it'll fail is if something falls on it, like a cube of ice off of an American Airlines toilet flying over or something like that, But nobody will pay for that. The American consumer is so alienated from what housing is. They don't even know what a better house is. They're like, this one's attractive. I'm standing here. It's 72 degrees. There's no rain on me. This is just like the other house. They can't tell. And if you say, well, the roof decking is 5/8 instead of the other cheaper stuff, and it's Douglas fir, and it doesn't have a Paralam beam under the house. It's a 12-inch I-beam, and you jump up and down it and show them that the house doesn't move and rattle. They don't care. They won't pay for it. So I want to blame it on the consumer.
I was thinking as I was reading this that the Nearings go to some effort to get away from consumerism. And as I was looking back at it a couple of days ago, I thought, well, that seems a weird thing to have to justify. That the reason why people don't want to buy the house that's going to last for 100 or 200 years is that they don't buy anything that lasts. They don't want anything that lasts. They want to keep buying. That this is the mode that we're in, to continually buy more and more stuff instead of just...
It's a starter home.
Yeah, it's a starter home. And I think that's as wrong as usury. I think I was thinking about the economy in general and thinking in terms of growth. We need to have growth. It's a recession if you have 2 quarters with no growth or with negative growth. Shrinkage. The economy might be better thought of as, well, not even a farm, because the farms don't work this way, but kind of like a terrarium.
Yeah.
That you're stuck in the jar with everyone else.
It's a global terrarium.
Yeah. I mean, this sounds hippie, but, you maybe read this book. But, if I'm going to consume more and more and more and more and more, to what end? More consumption, because consumption makes you happy, because consumption feeds your little dopamine receptors. And that's what we've been training ourselves to do. That's what the Minotaur subroutine wants us to do. And it's a disaster. And so where I'm sympathetic to the Nearings, I don't know how joyless they are, but I have a recorder too. I think it'd be pleasant to say it up, except, I go to church on Sundays, but to sit on a Sunday and play recorded music, I think that'd be fun. You should, I think, attempt to lead a more ascetic life. Make your joys be real joys and get off the dopamine treadmill. It might be that we're all of us sick.
Oh, I am. Yeah, I just looked at my stupid phone. Yeah, we're all sick with it. Their concrete mixer that lasted them 20 years, it should be noted, that was manual.
Yeah,
they were cranking that thing. No electric motor, no belts. I don't know, maybe it had a belt. But they were cranking that thing. So, you might be able to go to Layman's Hardware and buy one and that would last a lifetime. I don't know. So this house thing, here, let me be a communist for a minute. We're building this house. We've got 56 acres. We're building this house. And right now we're living in the barn, the shop building. And I wanted to build about a 900 square foot house. Not a tiny home. That's stupid. But, we're about
a mini home.
We're about out of the child business, my wife and I. So I told her, we need a bedroom, a place to entertain people, a place to prepare food, a place to wash clothes, and a big porch. And we debated it and debated it and debated it, and we're ending up with a 2,300 square foot house. Not because I lost, but she's like, listen, when we can't do this anymore, one of the grandkids needs to move in here, and we'll remodel. We'll have the quarters that we're in right now remodeled, and because they're small, it's small, and we will move our old asses in over there, and then these young people can have that house. Because one of the things that it makes me, this is where I'm going to be a commie, one of the things that drives me crazy is that every single person in my family that had anything on the ball has had to retire a 30-year mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of them. I've been doing genealogy stuff, and I know all of their names for 150 years. Every one of them that was able to get out of sharecropping or renting paid off a note. Not one of them was able to say, here, worthy grandchild, your shelter is cared for. Go do something better and greater than that. Not once. Not once.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. That's crazy. We're fine. We've paid our stuff off a long time ago. Like I don't have any. All of my people are sharecroppers and poor people. This isn't sour grapes because, one of my great grand cousins or something squandered a fortune. It's like these are people that bought land, built modest homes, worked hard, paid them off, and then every other kid had to do it too. Not every other. Not I don't mean the odd numbered ones. I mean all of them. That's insane.
Yeah.
So we're building this house a little better. It should last. It should be inexpensive to maintain. So far as I can tell, it's not a stone house like the Nearings would build. I would like to have done that. And then hopefully we'll have a grandkid that shares the mission who's worth having it. That's the hard part, though.
It's the hard part.
That's the hard part because nobody wants to think they played favorites. Everybody's equal, right? We got the Declaration of Independence. How do you give a house to one of the kids and you don't give it to the other kids? So you take whatever you accumulated over your entire life and you chop it into pro rata pieces and you give it to them in cash and they buy a motherfucking boat.
Yeah.
And then they have to go borrow money.
Yep.
They have to go to the guy.
It's good for somebody.
And on we go.
Mm-hmm.
It's stupid.
Yeah, everything that all of your ancestors did, your ancestors who managed to survive war and plague and transcontinental and transatlantic journeys, what does it add up to?
Open borders?
Yeah. Hell. I've seen my ancestral farm. I don't know who owns it now. It's so beautiful. We should.
When it all collapses, let's go get it.
Well, it's in Illinois, though.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I was listening. I mean, our member, our OGB member, Eric, one of the members of note, was helping out at a farm. I wish I knew which one it was. Where, what did he say? That the guy that owns it is 98, and then the son is 71, and they sold it to somebody.
I think they were carrying the note, right? So they let somebody have possession and they were making payments to them, and then they failed.
And they failed and left the keys on the counter and left. And so he's over there helping out and trying to learn how to run the thing. Nobody wants to. If people wanted permanence, we would have permanence. If we wanted capital goods that lasted a lifetime, we would have them.
I want them. I can't afford them. And when we read Belloc, when we read Chesterton, when we read this, you see that if you have currency, which isn't money, if you have currency, every decision is reduced to a numerical one. And if I said, my builder's Mennonite, and we talked to him about this, if we said, I want this framed up, no metal fasteners, they're a failure point. They're a problem.
Mm-hmm.
They're a problem. If your 150, 220-year-old Amish barn leaks, the wood pegs are just going to swell, and it tightens up. I mean, it'll eventually rot, but the fasteners don't rust. If you want it to last a long time, you don't want that. Anyway, so we talked about, what can we do to make this excellent and make this last 300 years? I have a friend who lives in a 300-year-old house in England. It was the gameskeeper's cottage attached to one of these manor homes. And it's a lovely, 1,500 square foot house. It's 300 years old. It's made completely of stone. When you walk from one room to the other through a doorway, the wall's 3 feet thick. Nobody can afford to do it. And because there are cheaper alternatives and so many pressures, you are forced to take the cheaper alternative, not because you're not willing to spend the money, but because your friends aren't willing to spend the money. And the timber framer doesn't even exist because there's no market for it.
Right.
The stonemason that knows how to make interior stone walls doesn't exist. The guy that knows how to put rendering on them and then whitewash them, he doesn't.
Yeah,
they're
the
gone.
plasterers are gone.
You can't even do what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, you can live in your pod.
Right. So, Internet Anon, Wrath of Non, GNON, on his Substack the other day wrote a thing about building a 1,000-year house. And he says you have to build it out of vernacular material. It has to be a material you can get. It needs to be from around where you are. He doesn't think that you can build a house that just straight up lasts 1,000 years, but you need to repair it and take care of it for 1,000 years. So it needs to be made out of materials that you can find in 100, 200, 300 years. You're not going to be able to find sheetrock. So there's that. And he says it needs to be beautiful. It's like, if it's not beautiful, nobody will keep it. They'll tear it down.
Right.
That's a great article. It's short. People ought to go find that if they're thinking this way. I bet the Nearings, okay, we'll get back to the book. They lived in Vermont for 21 years.
Yeah. And then moved to Maine.
Because, Vermont got too much hustle and bustle. And I believe that the Vermont place is now run by like the Scott and Helen Nearing Trust or something like that. So you can go there and they continue to, teach their commie lessons and whatever. But the building, I'm sure the buildings are still there. They've been re-roofed many times, I'm sure. They probably added some electrical stuff to them. They probably put Ethernet cable in them. I don't know. But they're still there. Did you know? This is interesting. Did you read the second book in here?
Read half of it and skimmed the other half.
So they moved. They sold out in Vermont and they moved to Maine, and they bought a pretty big piece of land up there. And they have all these young people that would come there to learn how to do what they were doing and organize and whatever. And in that, she talks about that they sold a parcel to a couple of times. They sold a couple of different parcels to acolytes to help them get their start. One of their tenets is that they would not profit from the sale of their capital goods too. So they would sell their land for pretty much what they paid for it. One of the people they sold that to was Elliot Coleman, the new Organic Grower book there on the shelf. So his market garden His market garden there in Maine is on Nearing property that they sold to him for in the 60s. No, it wouldn't have been. It would have been the mid 70s, I guess. For I don't know, $100 an acre, $50 an acre.
Wow.
And they don't say that straight up. I put it all together.
That's in my gardening section.
That's a good book. Elliot Coleman, The New Organic Grower. My new garden is an Elliot Coleman garden, style garden.
My garden is mostly a Bermuda grass garden.
Hay meadow.
But we got pumpkins and we got turnips growing and we pulled a bunch of radishes. It is rewarding to eat your own stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The squash we had was really good. I just don't have enough of it. We have a bunch of watermelons. We haven't cracked them open yet. I don't know if they're good. I'm nervous.
Have you eaten any Hamburg chickens?
Not yet.
Don't let the kids eat it.
It's too good for them.
It's too good.
I want to read a bit on page 47, talking about hand implements. This is messianic stuff. Mankind has worked for ages with hand implements. Machine tools are a novelty recently introduced into the realm of human experience. There can be no question but that machines have more power than humans. Also, there can be no question but that they have watered down or annihilated many of the most ancient, most fascinating, and most creative human skills, broken up established institutions, pushed masses of hands into factories, and herded droves of anonymous, footloose wanderers from urban slum to urban slum. Only the historian of the future will be able to assess the net effect of the machine age on human character and on man's joy in being and his will to live.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm surrounded by machines here. I got, 2 computer screens and at least it's a used computer. I didn't buy it new. And the kids have their stuff over there, and I got machines all over the place. And it's watered me down and annihilated many of my most ancient, fascinating skills. I don't know how to do anything. So I say, yeah. And then I want to say, you first. But then they did it, which is admirable.
My Elliot Coleman style 5,000 square foot garden, I broad forked all of that. No machine, no tiller. I've got a Troy built rototiller that's a bad machine that would certainly have broke that up and taken care of it. But I broad forked all of it. And my uncle came by and I was riding that broad fork. He's like, what are you doing? And he would look at me and he would look over at my John Deere tractor and he would look at me and he would look at that tractor and he'd say, I've got a plow you can hook on that tractor. And I was like, I've got one too. And he'd look at me and he'd look at me. So plowing a 5,000 square foot garden is stupid. I know people that I've done it. What are you going to pull a 10 bottom plow and do it in one pass, 2 passes? Are you going to pull a 1 bottom or 2 bottom and you run back and forth and you compact the soil? You're going to run the plow through there to turn the soil over, but you're going to drive an 8,000 pound tractor over it to like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. What are we doing? And then, I know having turned that, you don't turn it with the broad fork, but having forked that whole garden, I know there's hard pan there. That had been plowed many, 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 many times. And about 8 inches down, there is compacted clay hard pan there from that plowing. And I've got a 14-inch broad fork, so I'm getting down there 14 inches and busting that all up. I don't know. I don't know how much time it would have saved me. Now, you could never broad fork 600 acres. The season would be over. Mm-hmm. You couldn't do it. So there's a scale where you can't do it. But, there are people like Elliot Coleman or Connor Crickmore or Todd Dwyer that do it by hand at an appropriate scale and make a nice living doing it. Mm-hmm. And there's no tractor. It's a matter of scale. You can use the hand tool if you pick the scale.
Yeah. Well, and on the small scale, again, our friend Eric, who, I don't know what he has. He has a half acre, an acre?
Maybe a third.
Grows every inch of it. And his basement's full of mushrooms. And People always ask him, do you have the special mushrooms? No.
Yeah, shiitake.
Yeah. Yeah, I've only met his wife, I think, twice, and I haven't really talked to her. She must be a woman of big heart to put up with what he does, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, I got to visit and take the tour. Yeah, I don't know. It's rewarding. You could do it. You can do more than you're doing.
I like how they cut up their day. Maybe they're not as joyful as I want them to be. Maybe they're secretly joyful, but they don't want to let that out.
They're New England joyful.
Right.
It's a different thing.
But they work 4 hours a day. If they don't mess around, if they're doing 4 hours, it's solid work. And I like that. I tend to work I probably only work 4 or 5 hours a day. Because the truth of it is I can't really do more than that. It breaks me down. I typically work 50 minutes and then sit for 10, depending on how hot it is and what the work is. I take an hour for lunch almost every time. By the time you put your stuff away, walk back to the house, eat, go to the bathroom, talk to the wife, get back to it, it's an hour anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then around, in the summer, 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock, it's just too hot. I mean, it's probably too hot before that, but by then it's certainly too hot. Then it's nap time. And then it's evening shore time. And then I've got online coaching I do.
So you have a siesta. You're following the continental model.
For sure. And
that's pretty highfalutin.
4 to 5 hours of like real live work is probably all that gets done. If you're not pilling around, if they're not in meetings, if it's not HR trainings, whatever, you can get a lot done.
Mm-hmm. I like that the talk about pick and shovel work as being an art. I used to do a little bit of shovel work when I was younger, and you have to learn how to do it. I have a $130 shovel I'm going to show you.
Yeah. Did you buy it from A.M. Leonard?
No, I bought it from Metalworks or something. Made in America, supposedly. When I got this book, I flipped it open. So I was working on my chimney. And I flipped it open, and coincidentally, it was on page 79 where they say, building one's own fireplace is a satisfying and rewarding experience. And that's what I was doing. So I bought a wood stove from you, and I bought all of the ingredients to make the chimney, and it was rewarding. I haven't used it in earnest yet. I mean, I tested it to make sure the smoke goes the right way.
Been a little warm.
Yeah. It's going to be cold tomorrow.
Good.
I decided I think I'm going to deadlift tomorrow.
I'm beat down with it.
Yeah.
The weather has defeated me.
Today is deadlift day. I think I might just go to the lake and float for a little bit and then deadlift tomorrow. The lake is now a puddle. Smaller and smaller. But, having something, look, I'm not a city kid. I'm a suburban kid. It was farms near us, but, I'm a suburban kid. We didn't do a whole lot of this stuff. I have my dad's tools. Some of them he hadn't used in 40 years, probably 45 years. He used to do a lot, and then he had a health problem, and then I think he lost interest, but that's a long story.
Well, people's income goes up, and then they don't do it yourself anymore.
Yeah. Well, it gets to a point, like, Reynolds will talk about it. It doesn't make any sense for him to mow his lawn unless he wants to.
I understand.
Yeah. If you're a high earner, it doesn't make a lot of sense for you. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you to do some of these jobs. It's fine. Hire somebody that can do a good job for you. But the stuff that you do, like my horrible concrete foundation of my well house out there that I did in 108 degrees because I thought I had 2 days to do it. I did it.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I have foam sprayed along the bottom, but it'll do the job. It's not going anywhere. But I did it, and 30 years from now, I'm going to look at that foundation and curse it and say, damn it. But it's the job that I did. The chimney, when we're sitting there in the winter around the stove, I did it. I had a little help. I had to get a guy to do the stuff on the roof. And he did it for free. I needed to have him over here he was going to come over and brush hog, and I was going to pay him. That's how I was going to pay him for the chimney work. It's rewarding to have done something and to be able to enjoy it. I think that's maybe self-reliance isn't necessarily the right word. I'm not sure what the right goal is, but something like non-alienation, rootedness, to be a radical. That's what radical means. Radical is related to radish. It just means root. It's the stuff that you're living in, the stuff that you're doing, it's yours. You did it. I think that's better. I don't know if I can convince you out there, dear listener.
You understand your flue now for your chimney, for your wood stove.
Yeah.
So, you have some sort of you have a satisfaction from having done it. You will derive pleasure from, this more pleasure from the stove when it's making heat this winter, but also you will understand it better. And that depth of understanding is really, really important. The mowing thing, I get it. I know exactly. I understand. I mean, my hourly wage used to be high enough that I couldn't justify doing anything but my main work.
Mm-hmm.
But you also don't know anything. You don't know where the potholes are in your yard or whatever. You just don't know the place like you do.
I want to get a scythe, but I find you can't get them. COVID has been very good for them.
Yeah.
For the scythe manufacturers.
I have an old American one.
Yeah. I'm on a waiting list for, there's an aluminum one you can get.
Whoa.
That's $150. And then if you want the wooden one, it's like $320. But you can't get either of them right now. Right. So I'm on the waiting list for the aluminum. I might get on the waiting list for the other one.
People do that shit all the time. They're like, it's $175. Okay, I'll take two. You can't get one. Then they're not $175.
Right.
They're infinity money.
They're infinity money. You can't get one. Would I take more ownership of my lawn?
Yes.
If I were doing it with my hands instead of firing up my Cub Cadet? I think so.
Yeah, the answer is no question. And, and Reynolds would say, well, actually he wouldn't. But one might say, who cares? It's the yard.
Yeah.
Well, but you don't know where that's going to lead you to.
I kind of want to go out and see his place. His hidden fortress.
Let's just go. Does he have to be there?
We can go see what could be done there.
Yeah.
Give him a plan.
Mowing the grass with your real type mower or your scythe or your push mower or whatever, as opposed to having Jesus do it. Who cares? Well, if you're out here and you're using a scythe, you're not going to want to do that very long. You're more likely to find a way to have the sheep graze it.
Right.
Right. So it's not just like, I'm going to mow because it makes me virtuous and awesome. Like you just have a more complete understanding of everything.
Part of the reason to get it, because I'm reading I read the Holistic Orchard or whatever it's called, the orchard book. Found out I was doing everything wrong. Probably apples are wrong here, but I got them planted. So
yeah, they're tough here.
We'll see. But I was thinking just going around the bottom of these trees and cutting the grass and letting it lay down. It's a whole lot easier with a blade on a stick than it is with a mower. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was what I was thinking of. It is you can get in and do things on a smaller scale.
Going around your fence with that instead of a string trimmer is pretty darn fast, and it's not loud. It's all in. It's probably just as fast as using your weed eater.
Yeah. I was talking to Todd in the seminar once. You have to figure out what is the goal of doing this sort of thing for the Nearings, for you, for me. What is the goal? The goal has to be like the title of the book, The Good Life. Well, what's good about it? It's a hard sell to most people. They won't see it. Which is fine. Not everybody sees everything. Not everybody's capable of happiness, Aristotle would say.
Well, yeah, but we don't even know what the good means anymore.
Right.
Go listen to the After Virtue episode where we talk about Alistair McIntyre's book. And, Yeah, people can't even agree on what that is. My youngest daughter has a boyfriend who's a great guy. We have people, we're like the Nearings. There are people at our house all the time. And he was out at our place one time, and his dad came by. You don't come by our place. I mean, he must have wanted to come out there.
It's not on the way to things.
No. So he got in his car, in his little shiny black German car, and drove out to our place and saw where we live and how we live. He's a polite guy, so he didn't say anything. But I know where they live and how they live. Having done it, I understand. I know. We have incommensurable views of what the good life might be. There is no, I can't imagine that he understands even remotely what we're doing, why, how it works, what the payoff is. Like, to him, we just look just insane. Like, that's all. Like, a lot of people are like, they're crazy for doing that. I see it, but they're crazy. Like, I think for him, like, they're just crazy.
In the valley of the blind, if you can see, you're crazy. So part of it is what the good life is. And part of it, I also was pretty sympathetic with the Nearings wanting to get away, not the communist part, but I think you go far enough around the back and the communist and the whatever I am meet. It's not wanting to take part of a culture or society that you see as bad. I think that's enough reason to do something like this, or at least, I remember when we used to try to buy cable internet and not have the cable television.
Oh, right.
And it was hard. Yeah. It would cost you more and say, no, I do not want it in my house.
I do not want it in a boat. I do not want it with a goat.
Yeah, but to detach yourself from bad things is really, that's enough reason to do something like this, I think.
I don't think it's enough. I hear you.
Well, it's enough to do something, not enough to go full homestead.
Yeah. I don't like reaction. Maybe I am reactionary. But, to just say that's wrong and I want to do the opposite, it's not enough to sustain you. It's enough to get you off the dime, enough to make somebody take action, leave Illinois, whatever. But I think you do have to have the good in mind, not just like, I'm fleeing this. I really think you have to have the good in mind. Do you think they did? Do you think they did? Do you think they led the good life?
I'd have to sit with them.
All we've got's the book.
Yeah, I was joking about, this is New England happy.
Yeah. So it's a little like Danish happy.
Yeah. It's like, honestly, it's like my dad's parents happy. They're kind of like this. They at least when I knew them, just sit and read, talk a little bit. That was it.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. My uncle called me the other day. Uncle Roy called. He said, I think that I may be addicted to physical labor. I think he probably is.
Yeah.
I don't think it's addicted I don't think it's an addiction where, he works and he gets some sort of stupid runner's high, which doesn't exist or something like that. But he finds a gratification and meaning in that he doesn't find anywhere else, So if somebody, his wife, my aunt, is like, why don't you come over here and sit down? He doesn't find that as gratifying or edifying as, doing the other thing that he had to do.
Yeah. I read Wendell Berry's first novel, Nathan Coulter. Have you read that one?
I haven't.
And the dad in that book is like that. He has a hard time relating to anybody else, but he just wants to be putting in fence poles or doing something. That's what feels real to him, I think. And well, he's kind of not wrong. There's a whole lot of that isn't real. That's what I mean by real. As we found out in the recent unpleasantness,
The Civil War?
no, this is the recent unpleasantness that very many jobs don't need to be done. Nobody's waiting for your HR emails.
No.
Nobody. Which means that even if your work wasn't alienating, it should be. Because you're not doing anything that's particularly real. You're not doing anything. They say somewhere the keystone of our economy was our food supply. Okay. So you're not doing anything that's at all remotely connected to your food supply. Oh gosh, this was in grad school. I was talking to a professor of mine that, gosh, I'm going to get the story wrong. But how strange it was that there was an economy such that it would pay for me, because it was paying for me, to go to grad school and study Kant.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of smiled and said, well, he was living an alternative lifestyle. And he says, yeah, and I have a roommate that does whatever his roommate did, gay porn or something, and it supports him too. Mm-hmm. It's...
I could have stopped you at the Kant thing. That's perverse enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that. Yeah, so the libertarians and the Austrian economists and stuff would say, "Oh, isn't that wonderful that the free market can provide for all of these interests and these niches and whatever?" I'd say the university thing's probably not actually that, but whatever. I'm kind of sad about there being a professional class of people that does that. I mean, I would rather have, Montaignes and weirdos
right.
doing it, or schizo posters on Twitter or whatever doing it.
Well, they're the only people doing it.
Yeah, for real.
In my opinion,
right.
The only reason I hang out on Twitter at all anonymously, you can't find me, is to follow the anons, who are the that are saying they have a freedom to say what they think. And maybe it's not what they think. Maybe they are, as they say, shit posting.
Right.
Which there's a lot of. But an academic philosopher who's got tenure is not probably going to say anything controversial.
Or even interesting. Somehow, the invisible hand provided for, Nietzsche and Kant. And Aristotle, somehow the church supported Aquinas, but Aquinas was going to Aquinas. How could he not have?
It was his essence. He was expressing it.
Yeah. How could he not have?
Yeah.
It just happens that was his ticket, but
Schopenhauer makes me think better of Kant.
Well, makes me think better of Nietzsche. But
yeah, I found an app.
Your daily art, Arthur Schopenhauer.
I found an app that you can load books to it on an iPhone, and it'll just read it to you in a computer voice.
What a hellscape! A computer voice reading Schopenhauer on the web.
Yeah, it was a young lady's voice who doesn't exist reading to me about the world as will and idea, and I read it. I listened to it pretty quickly while I was doing gardening stuff. But Schopenhauer's fun.
He's hilarious.
I never really read him. I didn't have to read him for grad school. He wasn't on my list of things that I had to read.
Oh, no.
And, well, yeah, now I know. But, you read the little, like, Copplestone summary, and it's like, the pessimist philosopher. I don't think so. But that makes you not want to read him. And then you read it, like, this guy is... he's funny.
He's interesting. He's hilarious. He's super smart. My home book group had, at one point, we had a 16-year-old girl in there, like a 72-year-old dude, handful of millennials. We were just all over the place. And the 16-year-old girl, she moved on because, public school is so demanding you can't really even fit in a great books group. Mm-hmm. She's not getting a grade for it, so she couldn't do it. Really, she couldn't do it. But somebody said something about German idealist, whatever. And I said, hey, I'm going to send out everybody, if you'd like, I'll send out a little Schopenhauer for next month. Like, sounds great. There was a young millennial guy in that group who called me. He said, hey, I'd really like to go have lunch with you. So, all right, let's go. I'm free in 42 minutes or whatever it was. And we met at Nelson's. And he told me he was disappointed in me for recommending that, Schopenhauer. And I was like, hey, let me just stop you. I didn't ask for your approval. I couldn't care less. So, like, if you think I'm trying to please you or that your disapproval or disappointment in me has anything to do with my life. I didn't
know you very well.
Like, that is insane. Like, who do you think you are that anyone cares about what you think? Your mom doesn't even care. and he went on about how I shouldn't have even... The upshot was I should have never have read it, let alone recommended it.
Was it the one on, which one was it?
Oh, it was a whole bunch of stuff. But the main one that made him mad was on women.
Not allowed to have opinions.
Right. And I was like, hey, listen, we read stuff in here we don't agree with. We read stuff we do agree with, but we read it and we treat of it, And I was like, so here's what I've learned from our conversation. You can't come to my house anymore. You're not in the group. Like, you're not a good faith person. You're out.
Did you stay for lunch?
Huh? I think I did. I think I sat there and just made him uncomfortable. And ate my chicken fried steak. But no, Schopenhauer is not in the list of polite things that you can read or talk about. So you guys should go read that. He's got some great stuff on aesthetics, music. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a poet who wrote philosophy, I think. He takes some risks and gets some things wrong, but wrong in the right way. I don't know. I thought it was a lot of fun, but this is where this stuff should happen. It should happen on people's porches, sitting around. Philosophy, the worst thing that ever happened to philosophy is when it becomes academic.
I think the Nearings did it. They would have these discussion groups. They talk about discussion groups, and they would have the music thing, but they also think they did some book discussions, and yeah, they did that. And at the end of the book, The Good Life, they talk about their organizing efforts, which I thought was super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to take all of these rural Vermont smallholders and
to collective action. And they weren't having it.
And I'm sympathetic to the Nearings. The American rural person, well, not even the rural, I won't even say, we'll say rural because that's who they're talking about. The American rural person is so individualistic that they won't help anybody else for any reason. They just won't hardly do it. I've got neighbors that will come and help me. One of them called me the other day, and he had a safe, and I went over with my tractor with the forks on it, and we unloaded it and moved it in. And I know that if I call him, he'll help and whatever. But as far as like forming a semi-permanent political alliance of some sort and taking on a goal that's not like not a task, not tactical or a task, but strategic, no way. Not happening.
Yeah, so this is in chapter 7, living in a community. Didn't work out so well. They had all these ideas that they think are good ideas, and maybe some of them were. They have, apparently one of their neighbors said something like, well, they may be socialists, but they do have good ideas. I don't doubt that was said. But I always think it's Helen speaking. You think it's Scott? I figure she did the writing.
It might be.
To none did these ideas appeal sufficiently so that they were willing to take a hand and do something about it. She calls them cooperators in theory. It seems that self-reliant people, which is what they wanted, they say they wanted people to be self-reliant. When you have people self-reliant, they don't want community. And then I was thinking, well,
I'm that way.
Yeah, I know. I am somewhat that way. Less than you, but I'm getting roped into this local church thing. Got all sorts of jobs already. It's all right. I have to call the monk back when we're done. But she or he says, ideological agreement is an indispensable prerequisite for the establishment of a successful cooperative group. That hit me. So you have ideas of how society ought to be run. Well, the problem is that it takes running. You actually have to, well, in the end, as my friend Noah would say, in the end, it's going to be violence. There's going to be people that don't want to do it your way. And unless you have, what they need a local Soviet to do it.
Yep.
I would prefer it be a cultural unity. This is what religion used to do. Go watch that Tudor Monastery Farm. We promote that show a lot. They ought to send us a T-shirt. And learn.
Dinner with Ruth would be fine.
Can I come, or is it just you?
Just us. Our special time.
Highly recommend that show. I think it was on Bezos' network.
Yeah, right now it is.
I might watch it again.
Have you watched The Secrets of the Castle?
Yes, of course. I told you about the trebuchet. Have you seen that part yet, where it sizzles in the air?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I've got a perfect trebuchet lane right out there.
If you don't have one, you're missing out. It's
Yeah.
not the good life. I looked up her IMDb page.
Uh-huh.
She's been in a lot more of those shows than I think we both knew. Like 15, 20 different shows.
Yeah.
Series, not shows, series.
Yeah. They're good fun. What I like, especially, I'll get back to the Nearings in a minute, but what I like about what Ruth does, who's the guy that's always with her?
They don't matter.
They don't matter as much. They're off building fences while she's cooking.
One of them is Tom. I don't remember.
Yeah, is that, a lot of history that you see nowadays, even popular history it's got such a squint on it. It's like, look at these stupid people from the past. Can you believe that they put leeches on George Washington? Ha ha, how funny.
We've progressed so much. She's an archaeological home economist, I think is what it is.
She's the only one.
Something like that. I mean,
yeah,
she just has respect and enthusiasm for it. That's really wonderful. Do you watch the Townsend's channel on YouTube?
No.
Townsend's is a company that sells colonial era reproductions for people that do like Revolutionary War reenactments or primitive camping and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a family-owned business, and Mr. Townsend runs this channel, and he's like that. They cook, build things, try to stay as faithful as they can to period technology and practices, and he's just so respectful of it.
Yeah, that's what I like. I mean, your ancestors were not morons, not any more than you are. Probably less so.
For sure.
And you could learn a thing or two. And if they did something, they had a reason for it. Chesterton says if you don't know the reason for something, you can't get rid of it. Because you don't understand it. You can only get rid of it after you understand it.
Everything used to be so laborious and so hard that if they did something, there was a damn good reason.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing that was just a toss off.
Yeah.
Oh, while we're at it, we'll go ahead and no.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I'm looking at this and I have, they need a group. They need a Soviet. They need an intact religious culture. Maybe they need something in order to be able to make this valley a little bit better, in their opinion.
Yep.
It's the libertarian problem. It's, if we're just, isolated, rational units, somehow we'll come together and do good things. Some of us, but not most of us.
This is really the problem with the whole project. I was thinking about our Constitution. It's just doomed from the very beginning.
Probably.
You're going to vote. So for you to vote, underlying all of that is that you're sufficient for self-government.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have certain virtues to be capable of self-government. Where do they come from? Can virtue be taught, Socrates? In Constitution Hall, did they ask this question? Because that's the damn question. If it can be taught, then it has to be. And if it can't be taught, then you can't give people the franchise. And they had a job in front of them, and they had urgent political problems they had to fix. They had war debts to pay, all kinds of stuff that made sure that they would overthrow the Articles. They had stuff to do, so they weren't worried about 1861 or 1917 or 2020. But that's the problem. Can it be taught? And that's the Nearings problem. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, there's this, what is virtue? Like the Nearings have to back up even more.
Yeah.
So they need an ideological community. Well, what would that ideology be? How would you justify it? How would you promulgate it? There
would be problems if I wouldn't want to live in their Soviet.
No.
But that's what they need to do. They need to do something like that.
Right.
Maybe they can have one valley, and if you wish to join the SSV, what would it be? The Vermont Socialist Soviet Republic?
Sure.
The VSSR? Then you can go sign up and move there.
But once you get in,
you can't get out. It's all Helen Nearing recorder music all day.
Frog Twitter, makes fun of the magic dirt thing, which is, can virtue be taught?
Magic dirt is the theory that virtue can be taught, and it's taught by just planting people in a particular country, then they will acquire the virtues needed for that country.
Right. It's the society somehow
hand-waving.
Just imparts these virtues on these invaders. I mean, immigrants. And in this case, the Nearings are the immigrants. And they go out into Vermont Hill Country where all these Vermont hillbillies are.
In Vermont, the hillbillies are Finnish.
These Green Mountain people.
Yeah.
And then want them to
be like New York communists.
Be like New York communists.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Private property owners. Yeah. Well, can communism work if you're not in close proximity with other people? Probably not.
No, that you could live in a society and hold all things in common, but it's voluntary. It's voluntary, and it has to be grounded in a firm system of belief. I don't think that Marxism gives that to you.
What's voluntary?
Oh, if I want to have my shaker commune,
okay,
I can do it.
Right.
But I can't make you stay. But all the shakers can live in common and, have the women go up one stairway and the men up the other.
See our episode on the rule of St. Benedict.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
Right. Like, this is what we do. Promulgate all the rules. Everybody knows, no pig in a poke. This is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do it, this is what we will do. Excommunicate you, then we'll give you spankings, and then we'll turn you out.
Yeah.
And then people come, and everything's a known quantity, and it all becomes voluntary at that point. So take that, libertarians. No, really. I mean, you could set up very firm rules for a community that might infringe on someone's liberties, and then have them voluntarily adhere to that.
I like, for me, the challenging bit, another challenging bit on 192. Okay, so perhaps we can summarize our point of view in this way. We are opposed to the theories of a competitive, acquisitive, aggressive, war-making social order. Yeah, I am too, kind of. Which butchers for food, I don't mind that, and murders for sport and for power. The closer we have come to this social order, the more completely are we a part of it. Since we reject it in theory, we should, as far as possible, reject it also in practice. They say on 195, keep out of the system's clutches and you have a chance of subsistence even if the oligarchs disapprove of what you think and say and do. That's a good motive. I like that they tried it. I think we would have to have some talks. There's another way that they were able to do it in that, as they say on 199, our setup contained no small children and did not have to take into consideration their support or higher education.
Yeah.
It's can't quite do it the way they did it. I like their fall garden strategy, which is just keep planting. Seeds are cheap. So that's what I did. I put a bunch of turnips in yesterday and some beets. We'll see if the beets come up.
Yeah.
But it was $1.
Right.
Like $1 is almost free.
My fall garden's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, whatever comes up, I'll eat.
Right.
I like their idea. I need to do this. I did potatoes wrong in my hard red clay soil here. I found one yesterday, though. We ate it. It was good. One that had escaped. They do all their potatoes just in hay. Mm-hmm. They plant them and then just cover them with hay. And then the potatoes are all in the mulch. I need to do something like that.
Yeah. Fork it, throw the seed potatoes down, cover them with mulch, wood chip, something.
Mm-hmm. Because digging through here it was no good. It was no good. You bruise all the potatoes, and then you'd have to cook them, or they would rot.
Can them up. Yeah. Maybe not wood chip, but alfalfa hay or something like that. Leave it a little sweeter every year, and then you could put them in the ground like a person, like a civilized European person
like my ancestors. But then the potato famine came, and they had to come here. One of them did.
I lost my book. I think my daughter has it. I think she read it, and who knows where it went. I think people ought to read this if they're interested in this kind of thing. If you enjoyed Walden, if you enjoyed Hatchet, the Gary Paulson book, if you enjoyed, when we talked about Emerson's self-reliance, these are New England people descended from that line of thought. I think Scott Nearing's family is old white shoe English and New England people. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. They did what they believed in, and they did it in earnest. They did the hell out of it for decades. And I really admire their integrity for doing it the way they did.
Maybe New England Puritans could be communists.
They probably were. We ought to go read some Cotton Mather and read about some of those people. They probably were. Well, I know
the Mayflower Compact, they had to...
How could you not have been?
Well, Rush used to talk about this, that the Mayflower, they had to institute a profit motive because they tried to be communist and they were all starving. And they had to change it up a little bit. But they had their town hall meetings and community governance and
right,
all sorts of smallholder stuff.
Yeah, I think the Quakers certainly were, with their sort of, distributed church service. You do it, you take turns at people's houses, and, mm-hmm. and nobody's the head of the thing. And, yeah, I think that they certainly were. Those damn Quakers.
But then it's a cultural thing, culture is politics downstream from culture. Is that how the saying goes?
Yeah.
And I think that's more important than people think. They think that you can just argue people into a way of life, and you can't.
No. Do you think that our current mainstream politics is downstream from culture, or is it leading it?
It's all Elvis's fault.
I'm kind of with you on that.
I don't know what would be the tipping point.
It probably is mass media, either newspaper or radio. Probably radio more than newspaper.
Well, we read Marcel a long, long time ago, and he was talking about getting technology before you have the virtues to deal with it. Well, when did we get mass media?
1930.
Yeah, you
have newspaper, radio, and movies, talkies.
We do not have the proper virtues developed to deal with constant news, constant entertainment.
Yeah, so in the culture, I'm sorry, not the culture. Culture and agriculture, they have and cultivate. Well, they all share a root. So,
along with cult.
Yeah, right. Media prior to maybe 1920 was slow and didn't require a lot of capital. You know, somebody's going to say something about the Hearst press or something like that, and that was unusual. You know, Benjamin Franklin shows up with a biscuit and 27 cents and ends up with a newspaper. You know, it didn't take that much capital to be a part of media.
But once you're there, now you have to generate content.
Yeah.
And which is the way people put it now. But you have to write stuff. You have to fill column inches.
Poor Richard's Almanac is content. You know, we ought to read some of that. It's content. I mean, he was just writing. Luckily, he was a wonderful person. So his, you know, he's a hedonist, but he had interesting things to say. And so when he was going to, you know, fill a few column inches, it would be interesting and better than Walter Winchell, you know. Mm-hmm. But now capital, so much capital is required that that the media isn't part of mainstream culture. It's really not. Middle class people don't have a damn thing to do with movies or television or radio or Spotify or whatever. Podcasts like we're doing are probably about the only thing that mainstream regular people have any influence in or on. I'm not sure that Twitter is one of those things. Blogs were that way, 10, 12 years ago, but search engines are so weird now that you can't really find those. People are so damn stupid, Wrath of Non, for being on Substack that I cannot fathom why anybody would develop a following on somebody else's platform. Mm-hmm. But I'm getting off track there. Mass communication is not in the hands of regular people. So and we confuse mass communication for the culture. So I think that the culture that is communicated by mass communications is pushing the culture, not following it. Mm-hmm. And I hold out these dreams and throw up these prayers that like normal people will see that this mass communication doesn't actually reflect culture and throw it off, but they're not going to do it. It's not.
No, we need the EMP.
Right. Yeah.
Imagine.
Is that Enoch Powell?
Electromagnetic pulse. Oh. That's what I was saying. Okay. Imagine you're a chicken. Okay. And you have evolved. You started in Thailand somewhere in Southeast Asia, Gallus, whatever. And now you're Gallus domesticus, and you have evolved and have been bred, and you have a certain number of inputs that you can handle, and then suddenly you get chicken mass media. How long will it take before Gallus futurus is capable of dealing with chicken mass media without freaking out? And so now you have a whole bunch of chickens that are freaked out all the time. Obviously, this is an analogy that humans are the chickens. I'm just explaining it in case you didn't get it.
This is not very Straussian of you. Don't.
We're not in a natural state in very, very many ways.
We evolved in small groups and tribes and families if you believe we evolved. We certainly existed in those for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And then in 1968, you sit down at the dinner table and your stupid mom turned the television on and Dan Rather talked to you while you ate dinner. And you're wired for thousands of years. You were wired that if you heard and saw somebody while you were eating dinner, they were part of the in-group. Mm-hmm. So now this son of a bitch can say anything, and your lizard brain, your hind brain says, Uncle Dan at dinner told me whatever.
Yeah.
So
and you're also...
We're being hacked. You got hacked.
You presume that what you see is real.
Yeah.
Because out there in the woods, it is.
Yeah, so I like the Nearings for unplugging.
Yeah. Yeah, it's enjoyable to read. It's a quick read. It's pleasant. It'll give you some ideas about maybe if you have stones laying around your property, you'll build a stone building with some forms and some concrete.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. I recommend it. It's... I don't know, it's not the world's greatest book, but it's something you might want to have read.
Yeah, it's a rough and ready memoir from earnest people who cared about everything they did. And I like that. And also, I love American utopian garbage, you know? I love that stuff. I love that Americans keep trying things. It's also a big, big problem because we're trying a bunch of shit right now that should not be tried. But I love the 18th and 19th century, you know, communitarian sort of movements, you know. The Mormons are one of those, whether they like it or not. You know, I love that stuff. Good on all of those people. Good on the Nearings, you know, the Shakers, our Mennonite and Amish friends. You know, that's wonderful. Like everybody should try to make things a better place instead of trying to tear down what everybody else has.
Yep.
Yeah, and the Nearings tried to do that.
What would you like to read next?
Oh my God. I've got some awesome stuff. But you know how it is. I don't know. We need to talk about this. Do we want to go? I talked to Brett Venot, Uncle Brett, and he says, you guys might want to go. I mentioned this to you. You might want to go the Dan Carlin route. And I was like, I can't become a normie boomer. I can't do that. And he's like, no, like the format. And I thought, maybe, you know, and then we could, you know, take some time, but then deliver a whole bunch of the end of Shelby Foote's Civil War trilogy, or take some time and deliver the Aquinas commentary on Aristotle, our commentary on his commentary, or something like that. I know this. For the next months, I really can't sit down, but maybe once a month. I could sit down more. We could just talk, but having read something thoughtfully, I don't have the room for it.
I say either book 2, Shelby Foote, or a chunk of Aquinas. I was thinking this would be fun. You could just do like the first 10 questions of the big Summa.
Yeah.
The stuff on
Mover.
Yeah.
What's knowable, what's possible to know, and then you got to go up there like 22 to get all that. But yeah.
But a nice chunk of something.
I've got some weird stuff I'd really like to do, but you know that Background to Betrayal, that Duberrier book about Vietnam and French Indochina.
I do not know that book.
Oh my God, Karl, we got to read that.
Okay, but what's next? What do I dig up next?
I don't know. The chunk of Thomas would be great, and Shelby Foote would be great. Either one is fine with me, because I haven't read book 2 of the Shelby Foote thing, and I have read no Thomas, and I definitely want to get that done. So that would kill several birds for me.
You want to do Shelby?
Sure. Fredericksburg to Meridian.
Yeah, I know how it ends.
No, we don't yet.
I see what you did there. Yeah. So anyway, it's good to be back on the air here at OGB Networks. If you would like to join us, you go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast. Is that right?
Yeah.
And we would love to have you. I know these are inflationary times, which means that, think of it this way. Our price keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. How's that? It's when you were a kid, you might have had this idea. I had this idea of college as being this place, this noble place where you would go and sit amongst columns and talk about big stuff. And then you got to college and found out that it wasn't that way. Well, we're that way.
Yeah. I think it's $79 a month. I think. Which is a lot of money. But it's not. You know, that what does that work out to? $948 a year.
It is 10 Big Macs.
And we do what I think a lot of people thought college was going to do for them. Not everybody. You know, if you went to engineering school, you didn't think you were going to know anything about Plato. But a lot of people took their humanities classes in their freshman and sophomore year, and listened to a snippet of Haydn and looked at a picture of a painting, and they got nothing. They got nothing. We're cheap. Brett Venant calls it the university. You do it for your purposes, and do it for you, and do it the way you want to.
Right.
We'll help you get through it.
Right. There's no grades. It's all on you.
How would you grade it?
Can't.
Socrates, how can virtue be taught? Or how is virtue taught? What? How do you grade it?
You don't.
I have flunked some people. That guy that scolded me for throwing Schopenhauer out there, he got flunked. We expelled him.
Well, yeah, it has to be. Look, it has to be a community based on. It has to be a community to some degree, or it doesn't work.
Should I talk about what the community must consist of?
Sure.
Everybody, if you're doing discussion of important things, and we do talk about the books, which we think are important, everybody there has to believe that there's such a thing as a real live, objective, capital T truth.
Right. Now, you could be a philosophical realist, you could be an idealist and think, well, the noumenal reality is not accessible to us beyond the veil of Maya. Okay, but it's there.
Yeah, we don't have to agree on what it is. No, none of us have to think we know what it is. But we all have to be in pursuit of it.
Right. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about. You get a relativist in there, and there's a lot of them that don't know they are. And you say, can virtue be taught? And they say, it depends. Like, perfect. What does it depend upon? And it depends all the way down. Mm-hmm.
You can't have a seminar like that. You can't get to anything.
Yes.
So they have to believe in a capital T truth. They also have to believe that it's accessible to anybody, and you don't have to have the secret recipe. You don't have to have a magic wand. You don't have to be a perfect color or anything. It's accessible to anybody that has goodwill and cares.
Right.
If you don't think that, then you can't do it. It's not that we're political enemies, though we are, but you just can't do it. If we have a seminar, we have 8 guys come over, men and women, whatever, and somebody there thinks that I can't talk about Medea in Euripides' play because I'm a male and I can't understand her lived experience, that person can't be part of the seminar because they don't believe that the human experience is accessible to people of goodwill.
Right.
And that person needs to go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, don't be sorry. It's a waste of money for that person.
Hey, if you're doing it at home, this is the case. If you have a home group and everybody is bringing their own book that paid $1 for or borrowed it at the library and it's costing nobody anything but time, and you've got somebody in the group that doesn't believe that there's a capital T truth and doesn't believe it's accessible to everybody, that group will not function.
Right.
You can't even do it because that person is throwing hand grenades at everything that's said. The third thing is you can't dictate what the other people in the room say. We're practicing rhetoric. The rhetoric has 2 pieces, speaking and listening. You want to practice speaking so that you get good and efficient and lovely with the skill of communicating the contents of your mind to other people. And then the other people have to practice listening honestly, hearing actually what you said and taking it for what it was said.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody won't allow you to use your words, they're interfering with that process. So if they want to tell you what pronouns that you can use, they are literally not allowing you to have free speech. Now, I know that they are the referent and they want to dictate the reference you use for them, but this is seminar. It's a special thing.
Besides,
it's a laboratory.
Look, language does not work that way. You do not get to decide how other people talk.
No, you can't. You don't get to decide what universals they see.
Yeah.
When I see your beard and your big calves, my passive intellect. No, I form a phantasm, and then I integrate all this, and I see a universal. I'm like, that's a dude. And there's nothing that dude dictating his pronouns to me can do to interfere with my forming that universal.
Yeah.
And then if I'm supposed to communicate the contents of my mind, and he wants to interfere with that, you can't do a seminar. You can't have a discussion, a good faith discussion with somebody like that. They've got to go. So if you're going to talk about important things and be honest, not just like rub each other's back, those things form a pretty simple, clean-cut ideology that everybody has to adhere to. Now, that doesn't mean if we all agree to those simple rules about truth and accessibility of truth and how we communicate, that doesn't mean that we will agree about anything else. There's a lot of room for fighting there.
But it's fair fighting.
It's fair fighting. And it's an actual fight. It's not will to power.
Yeah.
Mother truckers.
It's a very cool thing that we've got going on. I think if you think you might want to do it, you probably ought to try it.
They need to do it at home if they can. I want them to give us their shekels and help us keep it going. But people need to sit in a room with other people when they can.
That's certainly true. It is hard to do.
It is hard to do.
We make it very easy for you to do it in a fake room on the internet.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's actually very good. It's actually very good for the discussion part, but it's not as good about creating like the fraternity part. And I don't mean dudes, but you know, my home book group, you know, I've said this on here before. I'll say it again because not everybody's listened to every show. When you talk about these books, it's the opposite of small talk. It's big talk. You talk about what matters, and when you talk honestly in the person of other people about what matters, you come to care about them and actually know each other. You know, you can go to work with some guy and talk to him, small talk in the break room for 20 years and never know anything about him. But you can't do seminar with people in the same room and not know anything about
because the way you get out of that relativism, at some point you have to take a stand. You can't say it depends all the way down. At some point you say, well, no, this is true, and this is why everything else depends on that. And that's when I know you. Right. When I know what you think is true.
You have to put a stake in the ground. You can pick it up and move it, but you've got to put it in the ground.
I do it all the time.
I do too.
Yeah.
Oh, but you used to...
I contain multitudes.
That's right. So sue me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope you'll join us out there and pass on the podcast. I'm happy to be doing another episode. It's been a while.
One of the things the Nearings wanted to do was these social events. They would organize like these barn dances and square dances. Mm-hmm. I like that a whole bunch.
They were on the no alcohol side, though.
That's not a terrible rule.
I know.
That's not a terrible rule, but yeah.
Yeah. Alcohol's fun, but it's not that fun.
It's not that fun. If I remember right, their arguments were about were economic arguments about alcohol more than anything. Like it just costs money, and who cares? They weren't that puritanical about it. I don't think. I think they did mention some dust up over a girl or something because there was some booze, and
right.
But, you know, that stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, if she's good looking.
Or really, really ugly. It's like the meme, you know. If she's on either thin edge of the bell curve, there might be violence. All right. Well, there's that show. We'll come back. I don't know when. We'll read Volume 2 of Shelby Foote's Civil War narrative, the one that covers Fredericksburg to Meridian, and crank that thing out. I don't know. That might be 4 finished hours of audio, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll take our time on it.
We'll leave no battle unturned. Bye.